Mr. Gamba, thank you for joining us. So this is your first visit to the Russian Business Aviation Forum, and clearly it sends a message to the Russian business aviation community, your presence here. So my first question is what that message is, and basically your impressions of this event, if you could share with us.
Well, thank you very much. It's true that it's my first time here, and the message that I wanted to convey to the audience was that illegal flight is not only a Russian disease or a European disease, it's universal. What we're trying to do and to achieve within the association is to give some tools for the legislator, whoever it is, in Europe or in Russia, to fight in a more sustainable way these illegal flights, which are impacting, no matter where and no matter what, the bottom lines of the industry.
Are you satisfied with your cooperation with the Russian Business Aviation Association on this issue and on the other issues? Do you think it is efficient enough?
Well, first of all, we're very satisfied with RUBA. I think RUBA deserves a lot of credit for a certain number of reasons. The first one being that it's a very tiny association so far. It doesn't have a lot of resources, and despite that, they're I think doing an excellent job. So we're extremely happy with this relationship. Having said that, I think RUBA deserves better and more means, and it's of course not for me to say this, but I think that at one point it would be good if the Russian industry could help and support a little bit more its trade body. So it's not just a wish that I'm expressing to say that at one point it would be nice if RUBA could count on more means to be more, even more so active with the Russian governments. I guess, yes, it's something that you would see in other countries where you see relatively, powerful associations. In Russia, despite the fact that Russia is a key country, it only has, so far, a tiny association.
Yes, maybe it has to do with the fact that Russian business aviation sector has its own specifics, as you know. Not many aircraft are based and registered inside Russia, and that is a big issue. Do you also feel a special concern regarding the illegal flight activity with the Russian operators, or not to say Russian operators, but those aircraft that supposedly belong to Russian citizens?
I think you're right. It's a specificity of Russia, and that's why actually you need to have a strong RUBA to just precisely pinpoint these specificities and say how can we address them together. Now, having said that, that's the reality today that we have to compose with. I wouldn't say that I'm not worried about the situation in Russia, because of course, based on what you just described, this might help trigger, invite, incentivize Russian companies to sort of circumvent the regulations because they are not registered in a given country. I don't really know the percentage. I don't have the figures on that. Probably no one does, for good reasons. It is true that the words to mouth is that a lot of illegal activities taking place in Europe originate from Russian or companies belonging to Russian companies. And to be honest, I don't really care the nationality of the illegal flights. I just want to propose some tools that could enable then the legislator to put an end or to curb illegal flights, whether they are from Russia or from anywhere else.
I have a question for you. If you track down illegal activity and you know that this flight is illegal, what is the penalty for this? Because if you don't have a means of enforcement, then nobody wants to observe these rules.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's why you need to work on different fronts. Of course, the prevention aspect is important. You want to prevent things to happen, and for that, you need to make sure that you're having appropriate legislation. If the legislation in place is so not taking into account, let's say, business aviation, then you will always have cheaters. You will always have people who will want to avoid respecting or having to respect a legislation that is not crafted for their use. So I think the first point that you need to do is to identify which legislation is problematic and try to make it work for business aviation. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. It's a long-term thing. It requires a lot of confidence with the legislator, EASA in particular, but the national authorities as well, the Commission. And that's one aspect of the job, right? And another one is to make sure that whenever someone is caught cheating, you need to have in place the right instruments. And so far, it's not really the case. It's complicated. What do? You see the aircraft, there are a lot of legal questions that arise, and that national authorities are not police entities. So it requires a collaboration between the executive and the legislator, and it doesn't happen as of today. So the means are limited. But there are some, and we're trying to, again, pinpoint which legal instruments member states of the European Union have at their disposal, and to use them in the appropriate cases.
Could you name a few of those regulations that you think should be changed in order to slow down the illegal activity?
Yes, and please don't take this as, let's say, a criticism. It's just to say that these legislations have been made at the time with in mind mainly, if not only, commercial scheduled aviation. But definitely something like flight and duty time limitation, which, as you may know, is today under revision in the European Union, is probably one of the tips of the iceberg, whereby for business aviation operators, especially when you're commercial, it's difficult to follow because it's very restrictive. Whilst if you're non-commercial, you don't have to abide to these FTL, which are relatively, and maybe for good reasons, limited or restrictive. So you might have an incentive here to be commercial or non-commercial whenever it suits your need. That's one. Runway performance could be another one, where you have a clear, strong difference between commercial, allowed to use 60% only of the runway capacity, and non-commercial, where you can basically take 100% if you want, according to your need. Why is that today? Does it still make sense? I mean, a lot of non-commercial are using complex aircraft anyhow. And the kinetic of when you're crashing, if you have to look at the worst, would be the same if you're commercial or non-commercial. So I think there are a lot of questions that need to be addressed, looked at, and then eventually, let's say, assessed for nowadays business aviation needs. And I think we could find that if we would tackle these in an appropriate way, I don't know personally, but I would assume that it could then lower quite substantially the incentives that people have to fly illegally, up to, I don't know, 50% or even more.
My last question is whether you feel that the Russian business aviation sector is harmonizing with the European. Basically, do you feel that this progress is somehow increasing? And what do you feel needs to be done in terms of this?
I'm honestly not a specialist of Russian business aviation. That would more be for my colleague from Ruba. The sense that we have in Brussels is that you have some issues outside of Europe, Russia as well, that are difficult for us to understand if you're not plunged into the reality of Russia. What you're looking at from it from a certain distance is difficult to really grasp, and that's why it's difficult for me to answer this question. Having said that, it looks like with Olympic Games coming up, with Moscow such a strong hub for business aviation, with announcements that I've heard actually today that there are more and more Russian aviation registered in Russia. For all these reasons, I guess that at one point these questions will be tackled in a way or another, and they will go in a sense of rationalization. So I would imagine, not so much because they want to be a rapprochement between the EU and Russia, but simply for, allowing business to flourish. That there will be convergence, let's say, between both.
Thank you so much.